Hello, and thank you for joining us for Long Beach Symphony's Musically Speaking series hosted by our music director, Eckart Preu. I'm Kelly Lucera, president of the Long Beach Symphony, and we are so excited to bring you this virtual series featuring interviews with world-class performers, conductors, and composers. This evening, we are honored to welcome highly accomplished Hollywood film composers, arrangers, orchestrators, and conductors, Nan Schwartz and Conrad Pope. And now, please welcome to our virtual stage, Long Beach Symphony Music Director Eckart Preu, Grammy Award-winning Nan Schwartz, and the incomparable Conrad Pope.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you, Nan and Conrad, for being here. It is so good to see you again, and it has been a while. Welcome.
Glad to be here. Good to see you again, too.
And, and there's so much to talk about. Nan, let's start with you. So you are both composers, arrangers, and conductors, and you're living together. Do you ever get into each other's way when working from home? I'm trying to imagine how that's all working. I mean, I know you probably have a big house, or do you work out of the house?
No, we both work in the house. We both have our own separate rooms. And I always close my door just so I don't bother him. And he always wears headphones so he doesn't bother me. But we often are asking each other to give our opinions on whatever we're working on. So it's a great collaboration in that way.
That is actually that is actually kind of leading into my next question. You know, I mean, you're both extremely successful. You know your stuff. I know you support each other. But how do you deal with critiquing each other? You know, I mean, there's this famous Clara Schumann, Johannes Brahms critiquing relationship there. I mean, do you ever listen to each other's work and say, well, I think it would be better this way, or how about this? Does it ever happen? And do you welcome it, or you say, it's my work, it's my thing?
Well,
Conrad, how about you start? Yeah.
Yes, I think that we're very open and very honest, and we both want to do our best. And so we're very honest because we're both grown-ups, and as you know very well, this is a profession that you have to try to put out your very best. And luckily, I live with one of the most talented and insightful composers I've ever known. And on top of that, she's the most honest person I've ever known. So she's incapable of lying. And so it's very worthwhile to know that the criticism I receive and act on is honest and always on point. And so for me, it's not a problem because I trust her totally.
How about you, Nan? I mean, do you actually present? I mean, do you actually say, listen to this? This is what I did. Is this part of your?
I do have a good story about this, Eckart, because when I was working for Natalie Cole, I got an assignment to do 3 arrangements for her. And the first 2 I did, and the last one was Here's That Rainy Day, which was the most challenging because, well, I didn't really have any guidelines other than here's her key. So I started working on it, and halfway through it, I played something for Conrad that I was doing, and because I'm sketching at the piano, you know, and he said to me the famous words, "I think you can dig a little deeper." So, you know, it didn't hurt me. It was like, that was good guidance. And I went back in my room and I closed the door, and I came out two weeks later, and that was the arrangement that became the Grammy winner. So it was good advice.
Nice. And I mean, you both, I mean, Nan, you do so many different things. You know, you score for television, for a movie, of course. You wrote, you know, all these different arrangements for all these different jazz groups, and for these diverse singers like Kwasthoff, the opera singer, and then the Peruvian pop singer, and then also, as you just mentioned, Natalie Cole. Can you tell us what exactly it is when you say you arrange something? Because you just said, all I knew was kind of, I got the key. So what do you work from, and what do you come out with 2 weeks later?
Well, in that particular song, that's a standard song from the Great American Songbook. So there's a melody that is there that's not going to be really deviated too much from. And there's a set of chord changes that I can use or alter as I see fit. And pretty much that's what's there. It was up to me to decide the instrumentation, whether I wanted to do things out of tempo with a rhythm section or not. you know, and my goal is always to try to, especially with these songs that have been done so many times, I really try to come up with a new concept and reinvent the song as it's not been heard before. So that's my challenge when I'm doing an arrangement of a song that's well known like that.
And how do you present it to, for instance, Natalie Cole? Do you play this for her, and she says, this is not really good for my voice, or how, is there any collaboration, or you just say, this is what you get?
That was a very rare instance where I was given complete freedom to do whatever I wanted, and we met one time. She gave me her key, and she said, "See you at the session." And when she showed up, that was it. She stood in front of the orchestra and I gave the downbeat and we were off and running. And it's not like that these days. A lot of times, you know, people want demos and things, but in that case, I didn't have to audition or do anything. I just got to bring my own ideas to life, and she loved everything. So it worked out great.
Great, good. So Conrad, we met, you know, for the first time, you know, let's say 25 years ago, let's say plus minus a couple years, which is really amazing. And it was at a conducting seminar. It was a 4-week seminar with mostly young conductors of different levels. And I think you said that you were just starting out, and you said you wanted to learn how to conduct because nobody else cared as much about your music as you did, which was actually a learning experience for me, because I from then on, I really make it a point to be very conscientious about giving as much attention to detail to contemporary scores, you know, as I would to Mozart or Brahms. So thank you for that, by the way. But since then, because of your conducting skills and your extensive experience in the movie business, your conducting career has flourished as well. So among others, and I was very, very impressed by that, you conducted the soundtrack to The Hobbit, the Desolation of Smaug, I think, right? From The Lord of the Rings, with the New Zealand Symphony. Can you just tell us about how that works, and what that felt like? But I mean, in general, how do these sessions work?
Well, in that particular case, it was a special circumstance where the composer, Howard Shore, did not want to travel to New Zealand, and they wanted to record everything in New Zealand with Peter Jackson. And so they had a round of discussions, and it was decided that I would orchestrate the score and then go down and conduct it, because in the movie business, as opposed to the concert business, is that when we show up on the recording stage, the cue as is written, or the music as it is written, we first play it down, and then we find out what the director thinks of it. And then what the director thinks is it working in terms of the drama here or there. And so we have to sort of not just conduct the piece of music, but sometimes we have to make adjustments in order to satisfy Mr. Jackson and Howard Shore. And so that was the main reason I think I was selected to conduct those sessions for the last two. I think it was Desolation of Smaug and the Attack of Five Armies. I forget what that last one was called. But it was that kind of collaboration. And we would record these scores over 2 months. Each score, I think we had 2 months of recording sessions with the NZSO. And so that was what that was like. It's a combination of using your skills as an orchestrator, producer, listening to the orchestra, rebalancing things that might not work when we saw it to the film. And in that particular case, it was, I don't know who's going to see this, but in any case, the movie we'd be watching, you would see like 3 old men, like Gandalf and the Hobbit and whatnot, dressed up like for Halloween. And the only thing in the background would be a green screen, because they had yet to add all the sort of surrounding. And so when we do something, Peter Jackson would say, oh, we have to hit this harder because here's where an orc comes down and hits so-and-so with this and that, and around the corner comes this, and there was nothing that we could see except the green screen. And so we'd have to sort of imagine what Peter said and then sort of make those flourishes work in the orchestra. So it's a sort of drawn out process where the music isn't finished until it's finally recorded.
Right. But so if Howard Shore was not there at the time, would he then compose or recompose the music, and you would reorchestrate it, or we would say, okay, I'll deal with it, and you kind of took kind of over and satisfied basically the dramatic needs.
Yeah, so it was kind of a back and forth because it's again this business is a collaborative business, and so Peter Jackson has first call, and then Howard can do his fixes, and then I can sort of work on those, or we can have a conversation on email and go from there. And so it was quite a challenge because, as I say, New Zealand's in Tomorrowland, and New York is far away from New Zealand.
Yeah. I mean, you both, Nan, you as well, you both worked as orchestrators on these huge blockbuster movies. Nan, I think you worked on Godzilla and also one of the Harry Potter movies, Life of Pi, and Conrad, you've worked with pretty much everybody in the business that anybody can.
At least once.
At least once. I mean, can you explain exactly what it is that you do as an orchestrator? What does it mean? Because not arranger, right? It's an orchestrator, and how do you capture the voice? What do you get from the composer, and what do you make of it, basically? Nan, you want to start?
No, I'd like to defer to my husband because he's not telling you this, but the score to Mank just got nominated for an Oscar.
Oh wow, nice! Congratulations.
So maybe he'd talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, I think what I'd say is that a friend of mine, Phil Ayling, who played oboe and cor anglais forever in the studio orchestra. In fact, if you ever hear any of John Williams' scores from the 80s and the 90s, and you hear a cor anglais, that's Phil Ayling. And Phil Ayling used to say, orchestration is any job you say yes to. And so orchestration covers a wide swath of things. Basically, you're a kind of handyman for a composer. And as a handyman, each composer, one might need a sink fixed, one might need a light put in. One might just need the driveway paved. And so as my mentor, Arthur Morton, who got me started in the business, and he was Jerry Goldsmith's orchestra for a very long time. Won't go into his history, but Arthur used to say, a good orchestrator has to have a good set of ears. And I'm not talking about musical ears because that's already a given if you're in this profession. You have to be able to understand what the composer needs and what he's telling you. And so each job is different because each composer has different needs. John Williams basically needs just an attentive secretary to his sketches because his sketches are much like a partizel, which is just a small score. It's like everything is notated and you just have to pay attention. Other composers, it's even arranged once. One of my first jobs was I was given 2 bars of music, kind of like Mozart. And the fellow said, we need a 3-minute cue, where this goes from being sounding like a school orchestra to sounding like the London Symphony, playing this Mozart piece. And I remember, I think I made an enemy because I said that his 2 bars that he gave me was an antecedent phrase of no consequence. But yet we went on to do that. And so it goes from actually ghostwriting. Certainly when I first started 30 years ago, when there was ghostwriting to be done, orchestrators did that. So there was a lot of that. And so if they need help with writing some of the music, you pitch in there. If they just need you to pay attention, you do that. If they have a good idea of what the music is, but only hear the piano, that's what it used to be in the old days, you do that. And these days, they're sadly in an odd way. People use the computer to emulate the orchestra with their own sounds. And so today it's more like at times just transcribing the electronic stuff. So it goes all over the map, if you will. But I hope that gives you some idea. So you've got to know a lot of styles because whether or not you're doing something like an action film that's very tonal like Korngold or something, or it's something very modern and more ambient sounding, say like the recent Joker score or something.
Right. I kind of want to follow up on the conducting thing again with Nan this time because I'm just a conductor and I always wonder what it is like to conduct your own work. Are there any surprises, good or bad? When you say, "Oh, this sounds much better," this doesn't really sound like I thought. Where you have to correct or change things, but mostly it's like also what is the emotional state that you're in conducting your own music. I think a lot of composers choose not to conduct their own thing because it's getting in their way. I don't know. I have no idea what that feels like. What does it feel like to conduct your own music?
Well, I would say when I did a lot of my conducting, it was for the TV scores I was working on, and I was on the clock from the minute I arrived, and I just had to get it done, and there wasn't a lot of time to think about too much other than does it sound the way I intended, and most of the time it did. And I would just say I'm so looking forward to hearing your interpretation of my music, Eckart, because the older I get and the more experienced I get, the more I know that these things are left in the hands of experts. And so, if there's any kind of music I really care about, I would want a great conductor to do it. I don't purport to be a great conductor. I just know that I have to get the job done at certain times.
Yeah, well, I think that's for all of us. I mean, we need to get the job done. And I know that, and I'm so sorry about this. The Long Beach Symphony was supposed to play your piece Romanza this season, and so we hope, of course, to do that as soon as possible. And I'm looking forward to it. And I know that Roger Wilkie, our concertmaster, was looking forward to playing the solo, whom you, of course, know because he's a regular in the Hollywood studios and plays a concertmaster very, very frequently. But I'm just remembering, Conrad, I have all these flashbacks from our particular first meeting.
Yeah.
Because you said all these smart things that I never thought about at that point, at least. So I remember we had this conversation where you visited a movie composer for the first time, I think in his home. I have no idea who it was, no names. And you saw a score of a Haydn quartet open on his piano. And I'm paraphrasing. And you thought kind of, this composer knows music. And now I'm curious, how important is it actually for a film composer of today to know the classical repertoire?
Well, as movies embrace a wide swath of sensibility, I would say that you don't have to know almost anything about music today in order to be a film composer. In fact, I would say that the computers and all the kind of programs you have, it's almost a Dada dream come true of where rather than creating things, you can now just simply choose things. And you're given a whole set of sound libraries and whatnot, and you can sort of assemble and sculpt sound. And honestly, I sometimes teach in Vienna, well, until the pandemic, during the summer. And I actually had one student ask me, do I have to know how to read music? And for the fellow didn't. I mean, he was a sound designer. And so that's on the one end. Now then, for me, I would say the more that you're into music, and the composer that you're referring to is Gabriel Yared, that we were seeing Gabriel in his apartment at that time in London. And then Gabriel is just the most amazing musician in that he's always going back to the classics, but you can talk to him about Bach or Jobim. And that's one of the gifts of being a film composer, and saying that's one of the reasons I'm in it, and I think probably Nan too, is that every kind of music is open to you to do, and you can indulge it and study it. And I would say that the most important thing for a composer is to be immersed in music. And if you can read it, you should do that. If you can study the masters and learn something about architecture, you should do that. It'd be very hard to imagine Max Steiner or Erich Korngold, two of the founding fathers of film music, that without their knowledge of opera, ballet, and symphonies, that they would have had to be, they could have structured the kinds of scores that they did. And so I would say film music is open to anybody and everybody. But how you relate to music as a composer yourself, that's your personal decision. And I would always encourage people to quote John Williams, paraphrasing Rachmaninoff, a lifetime is enough for music, but let's say music is enough for a lifetime, but a lifetime is not enough for music. And I would encourage anyone doing music to be thoroughly dedicated to it and throw themselves into it. So I would say very important to know as much as you can. So that's my short answer.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned computers, and I remember this because that you, at least 25 years ago, you were even then, I think, one of the few who would still write with pencil and paper. Do you still do that?
Yes, and sadly, I mean, I have to hire assistants to transfer my pencil and paper into the computer because everything has to be computerized today.
Right.
And so whenever you see, I'm making half the money, but having twice as much fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I'm just one of these old people. I hear it in my head and I think with my hands, you know, whether or not it's there or here or there. And so, and I feel that my imagination is more, I can hear the orchestra better in my head at the piano than I can at the computer.
Right, right. And that's an interesting point. And that goes to you. You know, everybody composes in different ways. I know that Bernstein, so he was always fingering around the piano and trying to find things. And I know from my own experience that, you know, when I study, I either need absolute silence or I can actually also work really well in coffee shops. You know, if there's all that stuff around, I can totally block it out and it works really well. And but you know, Puccini, for instance, he liked composing in bars at the piano, but nobody was supposed to pay attention to him. I know you just mentioned that you compose at the piano. So I mean, do you need silence in many ways? And what is your process of kind of composing or arranging?
Yeah, I need silence. I have had some mentors that have worked with the TV on and writing in ink, you know, but that's not me. I'm pencil and paper sketching at the piano, and I do need quiet. It does, amplifying on what Conrad just said, it means that there's an extra step for me because I know a lot of people now, they just go directly into the software programs, you know, into MIDI or into Sibelius or one of those, but I want to write it out and plan it all out on as a sketch, and then I have to input it myself into, well, I was on Finale, now I'm doing Sibelius, but nevertheless, it's an extra step of work, but it's worth it for me because I can work on my ideas better that way.
Right. And then do you think that you, as you know, I mean, you won a Grammy and you were nominated so many times. I mean, do you think that with your success that you're breaking the glass ceiling somehow? I mean, do you feel responsible in any ways promoting other young female composers, or do you rather not talk about this?
Well, if I find somebody, you know, I'm not an advocate for women per se. I'm an advocate for good composers. I mean, I have a few students that we've met through our teaching in Austria that have become my just my proteges, and they happen to be men, and I'm not going to overlook them and go promote a woman because I think that they need help too. So I would just say that I encourage women, and I want to be a role model for women, but I want to encourage just the best composers out there.
Well,
she broke a glass ceiling or whatever early on, because I always want to say that she, up until very recently, to Jeff Beal, only she and Bruce Broughton were composers that were nominated for 3 Emmys in 1 year, for a series, for a mini-series, and for a song. And so she did that a while back, but she's been, but she was always a very, I would say, a pillar of the community for at least 30 years now. So.
Yeah. Well, and we're looking forward to not only, I'm not looking forward to conducting your piece, but in general, you know, what else you're going to produce. And congratulations, Conrad, do you want to talk a little bit about your Oscar nomination there?
Oh, no, it's not my Oscar nomination. It's a movie I worked on, which is Mank. I worked this year. I got a call from Peter Water, one of the contractors here, that they were doing this film that's about Orson Welles, and it's a David Fincher film. And the last David Fincher film I worked on was Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Right. And so they needed some, it was Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross of Nine Inch Nails, and they've had a very fine career as film composers doing their thing. And they have an Academy Award for their score to The Social Network, which is again a David Fincher film. And so I was contacted during the pandemic while we were all sitting around not being able to go outside, that they were doing this film that needed to have a kind of classical touch like Bernard Herrmann, because it was there was a number of things to reference back to the film concerns the writing of the script to the Citizen Kane, which Bernard Herrmann scored very famously. And so there was this challenge to take some vocabulary of today from Trent and Atticus and sort of fashion it into the Bernard Herrmann mold, if you will, to have sort of a tip of the hat to that genre, as well as other sort of things that because the score also has a lot of jazz and big band stuff that was done by Dan Higgins, and I did the orchestral stuff. And it's just gratifying to see that Trent and Atticus are nominated for an orchestral score, as well as for their score to Soul, which was jazz and their electronics. And so this was the perfect kind of job for me, because it called upon my knowledge of film music, its history, its techniques, and its craft, and able to employ some older techniques in music today. Yeah. I'm glad to see it recognized.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. It's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I think we have quite a few questions, so I'm going to hand it back to Kelly Lucera to kind of lead the Q&A.
Thank you all for allowing us to be part of such an interesting conversation. And to our audience, please feel free to submit any questions in the Q&A box. We do have a number of questions already. And the first one is from Pablo. He says, you've both worked for Alexander Desplat. What's the experience like, and how detailed are his sketches?
It's really wonderful to work for Alexandre because he is a consummate musician. He's actually a very fine conductor of his own music, knows precisely what he wants to hear, and has this very, what I think of as a French disposition for precision, utter precision. Everything very precise, and everything has to be in tune. But he's French, so it's generally sharp. So but this is, so in America, he's always facing our 440 stuff here. And so, but his sketches are extraordinarily detailed. Every note is there. He's very generous with his ideas, and he's also very open to collaborating in suggestions and working back and forth on the sound palette of the various scores that we've done. And of course, it ranges from things like Isle of Dogs, which with taiko drums and recorders and a bunch of far out stuff, to big symphonic scores like Benjamin Button, or I didn't work on this recent one that I love so much, which was Midnight Sky. But he's an absolute joy to work with because he's a great composer, consummate musician, and a man of extraordinary intellect and taste. And so it's one of the collaborations I treasure in my life.
Wonderful. Nan, Eckart already mentioned, but Marshall would like to know, can you describe the genesis of Romanza, the piece that the Long Beach Symphony looks forward to performing?
Oh, it's an interesting story because I was actually preparing for my symphonic album, which came out in 2018. And the conductor, Kevin Purcell, said, I need another piece. So I was working on that piece, and I had finished sketching the whole thing. And Conrad was out of town, and I had these feelings like, I'm not into, it's time for me to orchestrate this, and I'm not into this. I don't know what to do. So when we talked again, I said to him, you know, gee, I don't love what I'm doing. I don't love this piece. And I was so surprised. I expected him to say, dig in, finish it up, come on, you know, get back on the horse and all that kind of pep talk. But he didn't say that at all. He said, put it away and write something that you love. So that was a great relief to me to be able to just abandon that piece. It's still sitting on top of my piano, and I'm finished. But nevertheless, I decided that I like writing pieces that for solo instruments and orchestra. And Dmitri, pronounce it from Leovich. We call him Levici, but it's Leovich. Dmitri Leovich is the concertmaster was the concertmaster for the Synchron Stage Orchestra, which is where we were going to do my album. And so I wanted to write a piece kind of giving him a chance to show off. And it really came from my heart, totally. I just sat down and over the course of a week or two and wrote that just from my heart. That's all I can say.
We have a question for Conrad from Gasper. He says, you mentioned you using the old school techniques when working on the score of Mank. Can you elaborate on some of those and how do they differ from the way film scores are done today?
Well, first of all, they wanted to have the patina of that era. And in that particular era, the orchestras weren't particularly large. We're used to these gargantuan orchestras today, like with things like Gladiator or Justice League with 12 horns and 6 trombones and all this stuff. And back in those days, it was that you had to basically get a kind of specific kind of tone color that would be associated with an idea. Let's call it a tone color motif. And with Bernard Herrmann, the simplest thing is just to think about muted brass. And muted brass was something that was quite used in those days to sort of contrast and blend with the woodwinds and as opposed to the open brass. And we also used, those were specific sort of tone color things that we'd go through. But you also had counter lines and also various kinds of harmonies that we brought in. With the strings, believe it or not, they would actually record with the strings muted back in the 40s and whatnot. For this particular kind of sound, even though it would be louder, but you would get rid of some of the overtones and it gives a particular sheen to the string sound. So we did those kinds of things as well. And we tried to find this sort of, the kind of gestures that you would have in the orchestra in those days. And so I'd suggest if you listen to the Mank score, listen to the opening titles, which is called Victorville. And you could listen also to the last thing, which is called All the Things Are Wonderful or something like the end title, whatever it is, the last scene in that. That sort of wraps up almost all the sort of 40s stuff. And then there's a lot of kind of almost Ivesian music too, where you have things at different tempos almost in different orchestras with jazz band against the full orchestra. And so it was, there's quite a range of techniques in the score, which is one of the reasons that I enjoyed working on it, because for somebody that loves composition and various things, it presented all kinds of challenges. It wasn't a monochromatic score, let's just put it that way.
And Kevin would like to know, have you two collaborated on some concert pieces, or do you plan to do so?
No, we haven't.
No, we just talk to each other. I like what she does, and I don't think she likes what I do, but she helps me. No, I'm joking. So in any case, we sort of inhabit our own musical world, but separate but equal, as they said. Only except she's more equal than I am. And I would say that honestly. She's a. Is
that a quote from Animal Farm?
It's a quote from Animal Farm.
Jorge is coming to us all the way from Guadalajara, and he would like to know, Nan, are you working on any new concert music?
No, actually, my focus has been on musicals, believe it or not. I'm working on 2 musicals concurrently. And by the way, Jorge, calling from Guadalajara, is one of my prize students. I don't want to say my prize student. One of our students that we met along the way in Baden, Austria with the Hollywood Music Workshop. And here's a guy that lives in Guadalajara, Mexico, and is more knowledgeable about vocal harmony and sophisticated vocal groups such as the Singers Unlimited than anybody I know. So hats off to Jorge. But anyway, yeah, musicals. I'm not doing any concert music at the moment, but I'm open to anyone wanting to have me do something, because I like to be asked. That's how I roll.
That's really good to know. And let's see, Natalie, Nan, what is your favorite musical piece of Conrad's? And Conrad, what is your favorite musical piece of Nan's?
Ooh, that's a good question. Conrad did a score probably 20 years ago for a movie called Pavilion of Women. And that just blew me away. I just had the soundtrack to that before we even got together. I was listening to that and being wowed by it. More recently, his score to Tim's Vermeer is just exquisite. And if you people at home don't know it, check out the movie. It's a documentary, but the score is also available and it's just beautiful. It's just so uniquely Conrad, actually. It's kind of music that you don't hear. It's modern music, but melodic music, which is something that I think a lot of people in the concert world haven't quite achieved. They do a lot of modern techniques, but it just meanders. But Conrad has a great sense of architecture and structure, and it all makes sense. It's just, that's my illiterate, inarticulate way of saying it.
And I'm going to give 3 pieces for Nan, and they're each from things that she's, well, maybe I should get 4. But the first one is going to be the Natalie Cole arrangement. Her as an arranger, that is, in our business, we tend not to use superlatives actually among us because it's pretty low key. But I will say that's a definitive arrangement of that piece. I just, and so that's one of my favorites. In her concert works, there are several I really love. One is Aspirations, which is a very early concert piece that just is fantastic. But I'm going to say Angels Among Us, which is the trumpet concerto that is on the concert album. And then lastly, last year, Nan's mother passed away on Valentine's Day of 2020, and she wrote a song for her mother's passing that is just utterly stunning in its harmonies. And so that's my favorite leader, the orchestral piece and the arrangement. And now she's into these musicals, and there's just too much to love. So in any case, those are my, check out her website. You'd be amazed at what's on
it. Andrew would like to know, have you worked on a project that you were hired for that you were overwhelmed by, and how did you work through that?
Drinking. No, yes, it's there's always yes. Like I used to say, it's yeah. There have been several of those things. That was the nature of the business. Less so now, because that's one of the things I'll say that's sort of bad about, from my perspective. What was great when I first started out is that you would have a very close relationship with the composer, and whether or not it was John Williams or Alan Silvestri or James Horner or any number of people that or James is sadly deceased now. But there would be these things, and Nan can probably testify to when I was working on Troy, the replacement score to Troy, or to The Legend of Zorro, or some of these things that just had to be done immediately and overnight, and you'd have to pump out like 4 minutes of music in about a day and a half. And so, yeah, and you just have to power through it. And I used to always tell students when they wanted to become into the movie business, I'd always say, do you like to sleep? And if they said yes, I'd say, well, you better pick another business, because generally it's about 4 hours a night when you're on a job. But yeah, there are overwhelming things. But these days, because of the computer, composers tend to use large teams of orchestrators. And so you'll have, like, on one picture I was like orchestrator number 15. So that was only one night I had to stay up as opposed to 7.
And Nan, how about you?
Oh gosh, I have several answers to that. Years ago I boiled it down to this: anxiety, which is the first step is will I ever work again? And then I get the job, and it's like, oh God, how am I going to do this? And then I'm in the middle of it, and I'm starting, but how am I going to finish it? And then is it any good? And then I get to the end of it, and I finish it, but I don't know it's any good. Then I get to the session. Oh, it came out well. Oh, 1 in a row. Oh, and then the completion of the circle is, will I ever work again? But in addition, I think Conrad has sort of identified this kind of neuroses in me, where I get an assignment and I'm overwhelmed and just say, I don't know my way out of this. And I'm very anxious and kind of angry and frustrated for a few days. And he just says, don't worry, it's like the crossword puzzle that you do every morning. It's like a jigsaw puzzle, you get one piece and something leads to another, and he's been right. You just start with one little step, and somehow that leads to the next thing and the next thing, and it gets done. But I always feel like I just, what's the expression?
Dodge that bullet?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I just dodged that bullet that one time. Yeah, boy, when are they going to find me out?
And Eckart, what about you? A project that you've been overwhelmed by, and how did you work through that?
Hold on. Oh God, overwhelmed. I don't know. No. You just dedicate the hours that you need to. It's just as Conrad said, you just dedicate the hours to it. You diminish your amount of sleep that you need, and actually I haven't really had that in a while, but it's probably also because I haven't really been conducting that much recently.
A couple more questions. One is, as an orchestrator, what are the most common mistakes composers tend to do? That's from Medhat.
Let me say, what composers tend to do is that they don't think like a performer, if I may. Is that when they write a piece these days, is that it's all too often that they'll give me a MIDI demo of it, and they'll go, here's the completed piece. And I always encourage them that really you should never write a note unless you know its duration, its dynamic, and its articulation, and that you have, and how it sort of fits in the line. And so I would say for composers, whenever you hand me a sketch, you should actually sit down and go, piano, put in the dynamics, show the phrasing, show the architecture. Just this past year, for a young woman, Emily Bear, who's a pianist, she did a piece to open the Hollywood Bowl premiere of The Little Mermaid that Richard Kraft had put on. And so she wrote a piece and I orchestrated it for her, but I also gave her basically a kind of composition lesson because she's a pianist. I said, you know, before I hear your demo, I'd like you to play the piece for me at the piano because you're a pianist and I want to hear how you express yourself. And so she sat and she played that for me. And like I'll say to this day, whenever James Horner would say, play the piano for me in one of his pieces, I heard more music in that gave me the orchestra than I do in sort of a MIDI transcription, which can be very, very dead. And so the major thing to do is just think about exactly what each note is and what it should be and why it's there, and mark that on a piece of paper. Even if you get a quick scribe printout of your thing, go through and put the dynamics, and you'll actually discover something about your piece that you probably didn't suspect. And that's the thing that most people overlook these days, is that they think, I played it into the computer, it's complete. It's not. And so always try to hear more and be more precise, and you'll get a lot further along in life. Be like John Williams, because that's exactly what he does.
Great advice. And final question today comes from Barbara. What advice would you each give to young composers or conductors looking to make a career in the music business today?
Well, I think that every genre of music is so competitive that if you can try to excel in many genres, you have a chance. At least this has been my experience. If the TV composing thing slows down, then the arranging thing picks up. And if the arranging thing slows down, then I'm working on a musical. So there's always some area in music that I can go to. And if everything dies, then I'm writing songs because I can do that by myself. And so that's helped me to just keep active. I also studied jazz piano and I have done that off and on for years. And I remember my teacher, Terry Trotter, saying, I just want you to just do this, Nan, because it just keeps you in touch with music every day. And so every time I sit down to play, it's just reinforces things in my ears and in my head. And I think that if you can become good at a number of different genres within music, you'll have a better chance of being employed.
I think that that's some of the best advice. Yeah, mine is probably more general. I would say, be sure that you love music, and that it's something you deeply have to do, if there's nothing else you can do. And forgive this, I generally tell students, going into music is like marrying a spouse that you know is going to cheat on you. You have to love them so much that you will stay with them forever. But know that they will make your dreams and break your heart. And you're going to go through all those things because that's part of a career in music. Because with our gifts that we're given are also the challenges. And we have to expand our gifts and use them to good use, whether or not you're an excellent pianist or a great violinist or this or that, or maybe your challenge is that you don't have a good memory or something, but there's going to be a challenge and there's going to be a gift. And just, you love it enough that you work on all those things every day and just do music every day, every day, every day. And just have a plan of where you want to be. And like Nan said, when I was growing up, to be a composer, I always thought that Brahms knew everything. Oh, and he did. That's so amazing. And try to endeavor to know as much as you can, because there's always something to learn. And also know that that's part of the gift. Because if you're not humbled by music every day, then change the way you do music. And if you don't learn something about music every day, I say change the way that you do music, because there's always something to learn, a new piece to encounter, a new composer, and maybe even something new in yourself that you've never thought about. And so be involved. And if you can't be, pick something else to do, because if you're in it as long as I am, if you don't love it, trust me, it's not worth doing.
It's true for arts administrators too, by the way. Great advice. And Eckart, you have the final word.
Oh God, I cannot possibly top what Conrad just said, besides to second everything that he said. The previous question was actually also, I go back to this because of course we are always overwhelmed. And every time I stand in front of an orchestra, I know how little I know, and I know how little I hear, and I know how little I can do as a conductor. And you have to kind of know where you are. But if you're a composer, either do what Conrad did and what Nan does, is like learn how to conduct, because it is true that 99% of the time you will be your best advocate if you know how to conduct. And if not, make friends with as many conductors as you can, because I know I am always looking for new music. And I know it's out there, but it takes hours and hours and days to kind of sift through all the stuff that is there. Mm-hmm. And so people go back to people they know, and where quality is guaranteed. And so there is performance opportunities for sure, but you have to kind of know people. And as Conrad said, you have to love it so much that you can take setbacks, and that you can also deal with your knowledge of not knowing everything.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, that was the last question we have time for today. Thank you to our audience for your great questions and for tuning into Musically Speaking. We look forward to bringing you our next program in a few weeks, featuring Sivan Silver and Gil Garberg of the internationally renowned Silver Garberg piano duo. And thank you to Eckart, Nan, and Conrad for allowing us to be a part of this conversation today. It was so interesting, and we really enjoyed learning more about you, Nan and Conrad. And we look forward to having you in Long Beach sometime very soon.
Me too. Thank you.
So do we. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and be well.